will rise. You must endure.
Harvest season had always been Elias Ward's favorite time of year. The fields stretched wide and gold beneath the late afternoon sun, wheat bending softly in the breeze like a sea of quiet promise. The scent of dry earth and cut grain hung thick in the air, comforting and familiar. Harvest was honest work. Predictable. It followed effort and rewarded patience. War was not honest. War had taken his brother, burned half the eastern farms 5 years ago, and left scars in the village that still surfaced in low voices whenever the word orc was spoken. Elias wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against the fence post marking the outer edge of his land. Beyond that line, the land dipped toward a sparse tree line that separated the valley from the old northern road. Few travelers passed that way anymore. He almost missed it, a shape in the tall grass near the broken corner of his fence. At first, he thought it was a fallen deer. The wheat bent strangely there, flattened in a narrow path leading inward from the road. He frowned. No deer moved like that. Elias set his tools down and walked slowly toward the disturbance, boots brushing softly through stalks of grain. The closer he got, the more unnatural it looked, not animal, not wind. Then he saw green, not the pale green of young shoots. Darker, muted, skin. She lay half-curled in the field just beyond his fence line. One arm draped over her ribs as though holding herself together. Her armor was cracked and scorched in places, leather straps torn, metal plates dented. Dried blood streaked along her temple and down one shoulder. An orc. Elias stopped a few paces away. The world seemed to narrow around that single realization. She was large, taller than any human woman he'd known. Her frame built for battle, not harvest. Faint tusks curved upward from her lower jaw. Her dark hair, braided tightly in warrior's style, had come loose in places, clinging to her face with sweat and dirt. She was not dead. Her chest rose and fell shallowly. He glanced back toward the village road instinctively. No one else had seen. The old instincts stirred quickly, the warnings drilled into him since boyhood. Orcs did not wander alone. Orcs did not collapse near farms by accident. Orcs brought trouble. He stepped closer anyway. Her hand twitched faintly as he approached. Elias crouched carefully, keeping distance at first. He could see the wound now, a deep gash along her side, hastily wrapped with cloth that had long since soaked through. Whoever had bound it had done so in desperation, not comfort. She had walked far, too far. Her lips moved faintly. No words formed, only breath. Elias swallowed. He remembered smoke rising over his village years ago. Remembered gripping a shovel like a weapon while armored silhouettes advanced through haze. He remembered fear. But this was not an advancing silhouette. This was someone dying in his field. He exhaled slowly and removed his work gloves. When he reached out, her hand snapped upward weakly, reflexive, defensive. Her eyes fluttered open for a brief second. Dark, sharp, wild with instinct. Then they unfocused again. Easy, Elias said quietly. She did not understand his words, but his tone carried no threat. He examined the wound more closely. The cut was clean, blade, not arrow, likely from close combat. Infection would follow quickly without care. If the village saw her. He didn't finish the thought. Elias stood and scanned the road once more. Still empty. He made the decision in that breath. He slid one arm carefully beneath her shoulders and another beneath her knees. She was heavier than she looked. Even injured, the muscle in her frame spoke of strength earned through survival. She groaned faintly as he lifted her, but did not strike. Step by careful step, Elias carried her across the field and through the broken fence line toward his barn. The doors creaked as he pushed them open with his shoulder. Dust and hay scent filled the dim interior. He laid her gently onto a pile of clean straw near the back wall, away from open view. Light filtered through narrow slats in golden streaks. For a moment, he simply stood there, breathing. He had just brought an orc into his barn. If the village found out, he knelt beside her and began cleaning the wound. Water first, then fresh cloth. Her breathing hitched as the coolness touched torn flesh. Even unconscious, her body tensed, ready to fight. "You're not dying in my field," Elias muttered quietly. Outside, the wind shifted across golden wheat. The valley remained peaceful. For now. But as Elias tightened the bandage around her side and stepped back to assess what he had done, he understood something clearly. By choosing to carry her inside, he had crossed a line far more dangerous than the broken fence at the edge of his land. Elias had hoped for at least a day. One quiet day to let the wound close, to let the fever break, to decide what he was going to do next. He did not get it. By mid-morning, old Bram from the neighboring pasture rode past the outer fence and slowed his horse. Bram's eyes were sharp despite his age, and nothing unusual escaped him for long. "Fence looks broken," Bram called out. "It is," Elias replied evenly, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Tracks too," Bram added, squinting toward the flattened wheat. Elias didn't answer immediately. He could feel it, the shift in the air. Suspicion wasn't loud at first. It started small, observant. Bram dismounted and stepped closer to the field's edge. His boots pressed against soil that still bore the imprint of heavy steps leading toward the barn. "You get visitors?" Bram asked. "Just wind," Elias said. Bram didn't look convinced. He stared toward the barn doors for a long moment before climbing back onto his horse. "Be careful," he muttered before riding off. That single sentence was enough. By afternoon, 2 more villagers passed by under thin excuses, one delivering spare twine, another asking about wheat prices. Both glanced toward the barn more than once. Fear did not need evidence. It needed imagination. Inside the barn, the orc woman still lay unconscious, though her breathing had grown more stable. Elias had cleaned the wound as best he could and replaced the blood-soaked cloth with fresh bandages. He'd left water beside her and a small bowl of broth cooling near the straw. Her armor lay stacked nearby, damaged but not scavenged. He hadn't touched it beyond what was necessary. He did not want to think about what it meant that she wore no clan markings. Near dusk, she stirred. Her fingers curled slowly against the straw. A low, restrained sound escaped her throat as awareness returned. Elias stepped closer but kept distance. Her eyes opened sharply this time, fully conscious. Dark, focused, dangerous. She pushed herself up halfway, only to gasp as pain tore through her side. Her gaze snapped to him instantly. Recognition. Human. Her hand moved toward her belt instinctively, reaching for a blade that was no longer there. "Don't," Elias said calmly, raising his hand slightly to show he held nothing. Her breathing quickened. "You're injured," he added slowly. She didn't understand every word, but she understood tone. Suspicion. Calculation. Her eyes darted toward the open barn door. "Escape route. You'd bleed out before you reached the road," Elias said quietly. Her jaw tightened. "Monster. Invader. Enemy." He could almost see the words forming in her mind, the same ones forming in the village outside. She tried to stand anyway. Her legs gave out instantly. Elias stepped forward reflexively to steady her, but she flinched violently at his touch, ready to strike despite weakness. "I won't hurt you," he said firmly. The lie would have been easier. The truth was more complicated. Outside, voices rose faintly near the road. More than one. Elias moved toward the barn entrance and peered out carefully. 3 villagers stood near his fence now, Bram among them. "Tracks lead straight in," one said. "I told you," Bram muttered. "Orcs don't wander alone," another added darkly. Elias felt his chest tighten. The woman inside heard them too. Her head lifted slightly toward the sound. Her expression shifted, not just to fear, to expectation. She expected this. The mob. The accusation. The end. Elias stepped fully outside and closed the barn doors behind him. "What's in there?" one of the men demanded. "Grain," Elias answered. "Looks like more than grain walked through your field." Silence stretched. "Is it true?" Bram pressed. "Did something come through here?" Elias met his gaze. "Yes," he said finally. The men stiffened instantly. And one demanded. "And it's injured." "Injured?" the third scoffed. "You should have finished it." Elias' jaw tightened. "It's not raiding," he said evenly. "That's what they all say before nightfall," the man snapped. More villagers were approaching now, drawn by tension the way smoke draws attention. Fear spreads faster than fire. "You hiding it?" someone shouted. Elias stepped in front of the barn doors fully. "I'm tending a wound," he said. "You're harboring a monster." Another voice replied sharply. Behind the closed barn doors, the orc woman listened. Every word. Elias squared his shoulders. No, he said quietly. I'm tending a person. The crowd did not soften. But something had shifted. Lines were being drawn. And Elias had just chosen which side he stood on. The crowd did not break apart immediately. They lingered outside Elias' fence as twilight deepened, voices low and restless. No one attempted to force entry yet, but tension coiled in the air like a coming storm. Eventually, one by one, they drifted back toward the village, not satisfied, not convinced, but waiting. Waiting for proof of danger. Waiting for mistake. Elias did not exhale fully until the last figure disappeared beyond the bend in the road. He stepped back inside the barn and shut the doors firmly. The orc woman was sitting upright now. Not easily, not without pain, but upright. Her back pressed against a wooden support beam, shoulders tense, eyes locked on him the moment he entered. In the dim lantern light, her gaze looked less wild than before, but no less sharp. You heard them, Elias said quietly. She did not respond. He moved slowly, deliberately, toward the small table where he had left the bowl of broth. He did not approach her directly. Drink, he said, placing it within reach but not touching her. She studied him carefully. Then the bowl. Then the doors. Her breathing was steady now, controlled. Warrior's discipline. Finally, she reached for the bowl, not breaking eye contact as she did. Her hand trembled only slightly. She drank. Not greedily. Not gratefully. Just enough. Her voice came rough and low when she finally spoke. Why? The word was accented, clipped, but clear enough. Elias met her gaze. You were dying, he replied. She stared at him as if the answer made no sense. Should have let me, she said. Not in my field, he answered. Her jaw tightened slightly. You know what I am, she said. Yes. Then why? There it was again. Not suspicion. Confusion. Elias leaned back against a hay bale, keeping distance but not retreating. Because wounded is wounded, he said simply. Silence filled the barn. Wind brushed against the outer walls, making the old wood creak faintly. Her eyes shifted briefly toward the sound of the distant village. Faint laughter, a dog barking, normal life continuing. They fear me, she said quietly. Yes. They should. Elias studied her carefully. Why, he asked. She hesitated. Not because she lacked words. Because she weighed them. I fought, she said. He did not flinch. I know. For my clan. Yes. For land not mine. For blood not mine. Her voice grew quieter. I left. That caught him. You deserted? Yes. Her hand tightened slightly around the bowl. They raided a settlement beyond the ridge. Not soldiers. Families. Her jaw clenched. I refused. And they called me weak. Her eyes hardened at the memory. They chose another to lead. She looked down at her bandaged side. He did not refuse. Elias understood. You fought him, he said. Yes. You lost. Yes. She did not offer explanation beyond that. The wound told enough of the story. You walked south, Elias guessed. Yes. To escape. No. Her eyes lifted again. To leave. The distinction lingered. She had not run for safety. She had severed herself. Outside, a distant shout echoed faintly from the village road. Both of them heard it. Her muscles tensed instinctively. They will come, she said calmly. Yes. They will demand blood. Maybe. She studied him carefully. You should give me to them. No. The word came without hesitation. She blinked once, surprised. You owe me nothing, she said. I'm not settling debt, he replied. You risk your home. I know. You risk your life. I know. Silence fell again. You do not know me, she said. No. I have killed. I believe you. She waited for condemnation. It did not come. I have too, Elias said quietly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. War, he added. Recognition flickered there. Not camaraderie, not forgiveness. Understanding. What is your name, he asked. She hesitated only briefly this time. Kayla. Elias nodded. I'm Elias. She repeated it once under her breath, testing the sound. Outside, wind carried faint voices again, closer this time. Kayla set the empty bowl down slowly. If they come, she said, I will not beg. I wouldn't expect you to. Her lips twitched slightly at that. The barn felt smaller suddenly. Not because of fear, because of decision. Two people who had once stood on opposite sides of battle lines now stood inside the same wooden walls, listening to the same approaching footsteps. "They call me Monster," Kayla said quietly. Elias looked at her steadily. "They're wrong." For the first time since waking, something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not hope, but doubt, not in him. In the story she had expected to unfold. Outside, the village was gathering. Inside, the monster had a name. They came after sunset. Not as a formal council. Not as measured voices seeking reason. They came as fear does, in numbers. Lantern light flickered across the wheat field as boots trampled a narrow path from the road to Elias' fence. 10 at first, then 15. Bram stood near the front, jaw tight, hat clutched in one hand. Behind him were men who remembered smoke from old raids. Women who remembered sleepless nights. Younger villagers who had only heard stories but believed them fiercely. Elias saw the lights before he heard the shouting. He stepped out of the barn and closed the doors behind him quietly. Kayla stood just inside the shadows, listening. "You don't have to do this," she said low. "Yes," he replied without looking back. "I do." The first fist struck his fence hard enough to rattle the posts. "Elias," someone shouted. "We know she's in there." Lanterns cast long, shaking shadows across the field. "You're protecting it," another voice demanded. Elias walked forward slowly until he stood just inside the gate. "I'm protecting someone wounded," he said evenly. "It's an orc," a man snapped. "I know. They burned farms 5 years ago. I know. They killed." The voice faltered but did not finish. Fear does not need complete sentences. Bram stepped forward, eyes heavy with something between concern and anger. "You've always been level-headed," Bram said. "Don't let pity make you stupid." "It's not pity," Elias replied. "Then what is it?" Elias hesitated only a breath. "It's choice." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "You think you're better than us?" someone shouted. "No." "You think we're wrong to be afraid?" "No." "Then step aside." The words came sharp and clear. Elias did not move. Behind the barn doors, Kayla's muscles tensed. She could hear the numbers, smell the oil in their lanterns, hear the pitch of anger rising. She had faced battle lines before. This felt worse, because this was not soldiers under command. This was civilians under fear. "Elias," Bram tried again, softer now. "You don't know what she's capable of." "Yes," Elias said. "You don't know what she's done." "No." "Then how can you stand there?" Elias met his gaze steadily. "Because I know what I've done." The words landed heavier than expected. Silence flickered briefly across the field. One of the younger men shoved forward. "If she stays, others will follow. Or she leaves," another added. "She's a scout. She's marking farms. She's waiting for night." Every accusation layered on top of the last. Elias gripped the wooden gate with one hand. "She walked into my field alone," he said. "Bleeding." "That's what they do to trick you," someone shot back. "No," Elias said firmly. "That's what happens when someone is cast out." The crowd faltered at that. "Cast out," Bram repeated. "Yes." "You believe that?" "Yes." "You believe her story over your own people?" Elias exhaled slowly. "I believe what I saw." "And what was that?" "A person who would have died if I left her there." The younger man stepped closer to the gate. "Then you should have left her." The sentence struck harder than shouted threats. Elias' jaw tightened. "No," he said quietly. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dry wheat and lantern smoke. Inside the barn, Kayla could feel her pulse rising. She stepped closer to the doors, but did not open them. She had fought armored warriors. She could fight villagers if she had to. But she knew how that story ended. Blood would confirm every fear they held. "You'd fight us for her?" someone demanded. Elias reached behind him and grabbed the nearest tool leaning against the barn wall. A pitchfork, not a sword, not a soldier's weapon, just farm steel. He stepped fully in front of the gate. "I won't fight you," he said. "But you won't pass me." The crowd surged slightly forward. Lantern light glinted off the pitchfork's tines. "Move," the younger man demanded. "No." "You die for a monster?" Elias' voice did not rise. "She has a name." Silence rippled outward. "What is it?" Bram asked slowly. "Kayla." The word felt strange on the wind. Personal. Specific. Harder to turn into legend. Inside the barn, Kayla closed her eyes briefly. No one had spoken her name like that in years. "You've lost your mind," someone muttered. "No," Elias replied quietly. "I just haven't lost it to fear." The crowd stood at the fence, anger clashing against uncertainty. They had expected denial. They had expected excuses. They had not expected him to stand. The night stretched thin. No one moved first. And for the first time since she collapsed in the field, Kayla realized something dangerous. The human farmer was not defending her because she was weak. He was defending her because he chose to. And that choice was louder than any weapon. The mob did not break all at once. It thinned. Anger cools unevenly, some voices still sharp, others quieter, uncertain. Bram was the first to step back from the fence. "We'll bring this to the council tomorrow," he said firmly. "This isn't finished." "It doesn't have to be," Elias replied. The younger men lingered longer, resentment simmering in their eyes. But eventually lanterns began turning away from the barn. One by one, shadows receded down the path toward the village until only the wind remained. Elias stood still long after they left. Only when the road was empty did he lower the pitchfork. Inside the barn, Kayla had not moved. When he opened the doors again, she stood near the back wall, shoulders tense despite her injury. Her eyes scanned him first, checking for wounds. "You live," she said. "So do you. They will return." "Yes." "You should have let them take me." "No." Her jaw tightened slightly. "You defend me," she said, not as gratitude, but confusion. "Yes." "Why?" He stepped inside fully and closed the barn doors again. "Because they see armor," Elias said. "And tusks. And memory. And you. I see someone who chose not to raid." Her expression hardened faintly. "You don't know that. I know you're not dead in my field because you walked away from something." Silence stretched between them. She sank slowly back down onto the straw, exhaustion finally winning over tension. "You don't understand," she said. "Then help me." She stared at the lantern flame for a long moment. "In my clan," she began slowly, "strength decides leadership. I assumed. A settlement beyond the ridge refused tribute," she continued. "They were farmers." Elias didn't interrupt. "They were poor," Kayla said. "No walls. No soldiers. And your clan. They demanded example." Her fingers tightened slightly against the straw. "The new war chief wanted fear. And you?" "I wanted warning." She exhaled slowly. "I argued for negotiation. For restraint. They called me soft." Elias leaned against a post, listening. "They chose another to lead the raid," she continued. He was eager. Her voice dropped. "He did not knock before burning." Elias' throat tightened. "You fought him after?" "Yes." "For command?" "No." "For leaving?" That distinction mattered. "You weren't trying to rule," Elias said. "No." "You were trying to stop it." "Yes." Silence returned, heavier this time. "They exiled you." "Yes." "Without clan, you're alone." "Yes." Outside, wind rustled dry wheat against the barn walls. Elias absorbed what she had said. "You carry guilt," he said. She looked at him sharply. "I carry responsibility." For what he did. For not stopping him sooner. The honesty of it landed cleanly. "You didn't light the fire," Elias said. "I wore the armor." "That's not the same." "To villagers who see green skin," she replied quietly, "it is." He couldn't argue that. Because she was right. "They don't see the choice you made," Elias said. "No." "They don't see you walked away from power." "No." "They don't see you lost everything." "No." Her eyes lifted to his. "And what do you see, farmer?" Elias considered the question carefully. "I see someone who would rather bleed than burn a house with children inside." She held his gaze for a long moment. Something flickered there. Not trust. Recognition. "You are not naive," she said finally. "No." "You still remember the war." "Yes." "You lost someone." "Yes." She nodded once, as if that confirmed something for her. "Then why not hate me?" she asked. Elias answered without hesitation. "Because you're not the one who killed him." The lantern flame shifted gently. Outside, the village slept uneasily, rumors already shaping tomorrow's accusations. Inside the barn, truth had taken shape quietly. They called her monster. But monsters don't abandon power to protect strangers. Monsters don't carry guilt for crimes they refuse to commit. And Elias now understood something the mob did not. What they feared wasn't her strength. It was the idea that she might not be what they needed her to be. The storm rolled in without warning. By late afternoon, the sky had darkened from soft gray to bruised iron, wind sweeping low across the valley and bending wheat nearly flat against the earth. Elias had just finished securing the outer fence when the first crack of thunder split the air. Inside the barn, Kayla stiffened instantly. Storms carried more than rain in open country. They carried lightning, and lightning found dry hay easily. Roof needs reinforcing, Elias muttered, glancing upward at the old wooden beams. Before he could finish the thought, a blinding flash tore across the sky, followed immediately by a violent crack that shook the ground beneath them. Then came the smell. Smoke. Elias turned sharply. Not from the barn. From the smaller livestock shed across the yard. Damn it, he breathed. Flames had already begun licking up one corner of the shed roof where lightning had struck. Dry timber caught fast, sparks flying into the wind. From the village road, shouts rose immediately. Storm panic spreads as quickly as fear. The shed, someone yelled. Animals inside. Elias grabbed a bucket instinctively, but the wind was too strong. The fire was climbing too fast. Kayla was already moving. You can't, Elias snapped, stepping in front of her. Her side was still wrapped tight in bandages. She wasn't fully healed. She didn't slow. Children, she said sharply. Elias froze. He hadn't seen them yet. Through smoke and rain, he spotted two small figures near the fence line, Thomas's youngest and Bram's nephew. They had been running toward the commotion and now stood too close to spreading embers. The roof beam cracked loudly. The shed doors were still barred from the outside. Animals screamed within. Kayla didn't wait. She pushed past Elias and sprinted across the yard despite the storm tearing at her hair and cloak. Her wound strained beneath sudden movement, but she didn't falter. Kayla, Elias shouted, running after her. The children were frozen in place, eyes wide at the sight of fire and lightning. Move, Kayla barked in their language, voice sharp and commanding. The tone cut through their panic. They ran, straight toward her. She grabbed both by their collars and shoved them toward Elias just as a flaming section of roof collapsed inward with a thunderous crash. Elias caught the children and dragged them back toward the barn. You're safe, he shouted over the storm. Kayla didn't retreat. She turned back toward the burning shed. Kayla, Elias yelled again. The door was still barred. Without hesitation, she drove her shoulder into it. Once, twice. The wood splintered. On the third impact, the door gave way. Smoke exploded outward in a thick black wave. She disappeared inside. The villagers had reached the fence now, horror written across their faces. She's inside. She'll burn. Leave her. Elias ignored them and grabbed a wet cloth from a water trough, pressing it over his mouth as he rushed toward the shed. Before he reached the doorway, a shape burst through smoke. Kayla, carrying a panicked goat under one arm and dragging a rope tied to two others with the other hand. Her hair was singed at the ends. Her exposed forearm burned red from falling debris. But she didn't slow. She shoved the animals clear of the spreading flames and turned immediately back toward the doorway. No, Elias shouted, but she was already gone again. The second collapse came faster. Part of the interior beam cracked, sparks exploding upward as rain fought against flame. When she emerged this time, she carried the last trapped animal, a young calf, cradled awkwardly against her chest despite the strain against her wound. She stumbled once in the mud. Elias caught her before she fell. The shed roof finally gave in completely, collapsing inward in a shower of sparks and smoke. Rain began pouring heavier now, wind shifting, flames slowly weakening under storm's force. Villagers rushed forward with buckets and wet sacks to smother what remained. No one shouted at her. No one called her monster. They stared at the children clinging to Elias' legs, at the animals now trembling but alive, at Kayla standing soaked in rain, smoke clinging to her skin, blood seeping faintly through her bandage again. Thomas pushed through the crowd, eyes scanning his daughter. She ran into his arms. She saved us, the girl cried, pointing directly at Kayla. The words hung louder than thunder. Thomas looked at Kayla, not at her tusks, not at her height, at her burned arm, at the mud and blood streaked across her face. You could have left them, he said slowly. Yes, she replied. You didn't. No. Rain poured down harder, extinguishing the last of the fire. No one spoke the word monster, because monsters don't run into burning buildings to save human children. And as the storm finally broke across the valley, something else cracked too. Not the shed, not the roof, but the certainty the village had carried about who she was. The storm left more than mud behind. By morning, the charred remains of the livestock shed still smoldered faintly beneath damp ash. Villagers moved carefully through the yard, assessing damage and salvaging what they could. The story of the night had already spread faster than the wind that carried the fire. She went back in twice. Saved Thomas's girl. Pulled animals out like they weighed nothing. No one used the word monster anymore. But fear does not vanish overnight. It shifts. It looks for new footing. By midday, the council gathered near the well. Elias stood at the edge of the crowd, Kayla beside him despite her re-wrapped bandage and the fresh burn across her forearm. She had insisted on standing in the open. "I will not hide," she had said. The elders spoke in low tones at first. Thomas stepped forward unexpectedly. "My daughter would be dead," he said plainly, "if not for her." Murmurs followed. "That doesn't mean she's harmless," one of the younger men argued. "No," Thomas agreed. "But it means she chose otherwise." Bram cleared his throat. "There's still the matter of why she came here," he said. Eyes turned toward Kayla. "She didn't come to us," Elias said. "She collapsed." "And the tracks," another villager pressed. "You think she wandered south without purpose?" Before Elias could answer, a voice cut across the gathering. "I saw someone else near the ridge 3 days ago." Heads turned toward the speaker, a shepherd boy barely 16, shifting nervously under attention. "Speak," one elder urged. "I was checking the northern fence line," the boy continued. "I saw 2 men near the old watchtower. Not orcs. Humans." A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. "Travelers?" someone asked. "No," the boy said quickly. "They were marking trees. With chalk." Elias' stomach tightened. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Bram demanded. "I thought they were traders," the boy admitted. "But last night, before the storm, I saw smoke near the shed. Before lightning struck." Silence fell heavy. "You're saying the fire wasn't just lightning?" one of the elders asked. "I don't know," the boy said quickly. "But I saw one of those men running from the direction of the field before the storm hit." All eyes shifted slowly toward Kayla. She stood still, expression unreadable. Elias' voice cut through the tension. "She was barely able to stand yesterday. She could have signaled them," someone muttered. Kayla stepped forward slightly. "I do not know these men," she said clearly. Her voice carried stronger now, less strained. "You expect us to believe that?" a villager challenged. She met his gaze without flinching. "Yes." Thomas looked toward the shepherd boy again. "You're certain they weren't from our village?" "Yes," the boy said firmly. "One wore a red sash." Elias' expression hardened. "Bandits," he said quietly. The word shifted the conversation immediately. Bandits had been reported along trade routes for weeks now. Opportunists who exploited border tension and fear. If they wanted chaos, Bram muttered slowly. What better way than setting a fire and letting us blame the orc? Murmurs shifted again, no longer accusatory, but unsettled. "They'd profit from panic," Elias said. "Farms abandoned. Supplies stolen." The elder at the well straightened. "Search parties," he ordered. "North Ridge and Old Watchtower." Men moved quickly now, urgency replacing suspicion. Kayla watched them go. "You knew," Elias said quietly beside her. She nodded once. "When I walked south, I crossed through 2 camps abandoned recently. Not clan, not army. Smelled of greed." "Bandits," he repeated. "Yes." "They followed you." "No," she said. "But they may have seen where I fell." Silence settled briefly. "They used you," Elias said. "Yes." The word carried no self-pity, just fact. Thomas stepped closer. "You could have let us tear each other apart," he said quietly. "Yes." "You didn't." "No." The elders returned before sunset. The watchtower had signs of recent occupation, discarded rations, chalk marks along tree trunks, red cloth torn and caught on bark. No work signs. No clan markings. Just men taking advantage of fear. The truth settled over the village like cooling ash. They had nearly turned on each other. Nearly punished the wrong person. Because fear is easier to follow than investigation. As the crowd thinned again, Bram approached Kayla cautiously. "I was wrong," he said gruffly. She did not smile. "I understand fear," she replied. He nodded once. "So do I." That night, the village did not gather with torches. It gathered with tools. To rebuild the shed. And for the first time since she collapsed in the field, Kayla stood among them openly. Not as monster. Not yet as neighbor. But as something more difficult. Humanized. And that changed everything. The council meeting filled the square before sunset. Not with torches this time, but with faces still unsure how to hold what had happened. The burned shed had been cleared to charred beams and damp ash. The bandits' traces had been found. The children were safe. The animals lived. But fear, once stirred, does not settle without being addressed. Elias stood at the front near the well. Kayla stood beside him. Not behind. Not hidden. Beside. Her burn had been cleaned and wrapped again. Her side still ached, but she refused to lean or sit. She would not appear fragile before those who had nearly condemned her. The eldest councilman cleared his throat. "We gather," he said, "to decide what happens next." The word decide carried weight. Not about the fire. About her. Murmurs rolled quietly across the square. She saved lives. She could still bring danger. She walked through our fields armed. She walked through wounded. Voices overlapped until Elias stepped forward. "You all know me," he said evenly. That quieted them faster than shouting would have. "I was born in this valley," he continued. "My brother is buried in that cemetery. I've planted wheat beside you for 15 years. No one disputed that. You trusted me with your fences, your livestock, your tools," he said. "Trust me now." Silence deepened. She did not light the fire, Elias said clearly. Bandits did. Heads nodded reluctantly. She did not summon an army. More nods. "She ran into flames to pull your children out." That part was undeniable. Thomas stepped forward and placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "She did," he confirmed. The younger men who had shouted loudest nights before said nothing. Elias turned slightly toward Kayla. "She could have left when the mob gathered," he said. "She could have fought. She didn't." Kayla's jaw tightened faintly, but she did not interrupt. "She left her clan," Elias added, "because she refused to burn civilians." A ripple of surprise moved through the square. "She told you that?" Bram asked. "Yes." "And you believe her?" "I believe what I saw in the fire." Silence. Kayla stepped forward then, her voice low but carrying. "I will not beg," she said. Several villagers stiffened slightly at her tone. "I fought for my clan," she continued. "I killed in war. That is truth." No one spoke. "I refuse to raid families." That is also truth. The words landed cleanly. "I have no clan," she said. "No banner. No soldiers." She looked across the gathered faces, some wary, some softened. "If my presence brings danger, I will leave." A few villagers shifted uncomfortably at that. Elias stepped forward immediately. "She leaves only if she chooses," he said firmly. Eyes turned toward him. "You'd still stand for her?" One of the younger men asked. "Yes." "Even after all this?" "Yes." The elder councilman studied them both carefully. "You would keep her on your land?" he asked Elias. "Yes." "As what?" Elias did not hesitate. "As partner in work." Murmurs rose again. "You would let an orc harvest beside you?" Someone asked incredulously. "If she wants to," Elias replied. Kayla glanced at him briefly, surprised he had framed it as choice. The elder turned toward her. "Do you want to stay?" he asked. The question hung heavy. Not demand. Not threat. Invitation. Kayla looked around the square, at Thomas's daughter, at Bram's tired eyes, at the barn still smelling faintly of smoke. Then she looked at Elias. "Yes," she said. The single word shifted the air. The elder exhaled slowly. "She stays," he declared. A few voices protested softly, but none rose to full argument. "Under watch," one man insisted. "Under fairness," Elias corrected. The elder nodded once. "Under fairness." It was not celebration. It was not embrace. But it was decision. The square began to empty gradually. Tension no longer crackling, but settling into something quieter. As villagers dispersed, Thomas approached Kayla directly. "My daughter carved something for you," he said awkwardly. He handed her a small wooden token, uneven, clearly child-made. Two stick figures holding hands. Kayla stared at it for a long moment. "They don't see monster anymore," Thomas said quietly. She did not smile. But she did not look away either. Elias stepped beside her as the sun dipped low behind the fields. "You didn't have to stand beside me," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "I did." The wheat swayed gently in the evening breeze. The same field where she had fallen now lay peaceful. They had called her a monster. Tonight, they called her by name. And Elias had made sure of it. The first morning Kayla walked into the fields openly, no one pretended not to notice. Dawn stretched pale gold across the valley, dew clinging to wheat stalks and soaking the hem of her trousers as she stepped beyond the barn. She had removed the remnants of her damaged armor. What remained lay stacked neatly inside, not discarded, not hidden, but set aside. In its place, she wore one of Elias' spare work shirts, the sleeves cut and resewn to fit her broader frame. The fabric strained slightly across her shoulders, but it held. The bandage at her side was wrapped tight beneath it. Elias carried two scythes. He handed one to her without ceremony. "You know how to use it?" he asked. She examined the tool briefly. "I know blades," she replied. He allowed the corner of his mouth to lift faintly. "This one feeds people." They stepped into the field side by side. At first, villagers kept their distance. From the road, eyes watched. Children whispered. A few older men paused in their own work to observe the strange sight of green skin moving steadily among golden wheat. Kayla adjusted her grip on the scythe, testing the balance. Then she swung. The cut was clean. Precise. Too precise. Elias laughed quietly. "Not a battlefield," he said. "Let it flow." She adjusted. The next sweep followed the curve of grain rather than slicing through it rigidly. The motion became rhythm. By mid-morning, sweat darkened the back of her shirt. Her wound pulled sharply once, forcing her to slow, but she did not stop. Thomas approached cautiously near midday, leading his daughter by the hand. The girl tugged free and ran toward Kayla without hesitation. "You're staying?" she asked brightly. "Yes," Kayla answered. "Good," the girl said. "You're strong." Kayla blinked once, unsure how to respond. Thomas stepped closer. "We're rebuilding the shed this afternoon," he said to Elias. "If you're willing." "We are," Elias replied. Thomas looked at Kayla. "You too," he added. She inclined her head once. By afternoon, beams were lifted and hammered into place. Kayla carried timber that would have required 2 men otherwise. No one protested when she joined the line. Work is the simplest language. By evening, the new frame stood where charred remains had been. As the crowd thinned again, Kayla stepped aside from the group and walked toward the road alone. Elias noticed immediately. He followed without speaking until they reached the old fence line where he had first found her. "You're leaving," he said quietly. She did not turn. "Yes." The word was steady, not dramatic. "Why?" he asked. "The village tolerates me," she replied. "That is not belonging. It takes time." "Yes. You don't owe them departure. I owe you freedom from consequence." He stepped closer. "You think I defended you for debt?" "No." "Then don't repay me with absence." She finally turned toward him. "My presence draws eyes," she said. "Suspicion does not vanish in one storm." "Neither does trust," he answered. Silence stretched between them, wind brushing gently across wheat. "I have no clan," she said. "Then build one." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "With you?" she asked. "With whoever stands beside you," Elias replied. "Starting here." She studied him carefully. "You would have an orc share your harvest?" "Yes." "You would let me work your land?" "Yes." "You understand what that means?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. She looked back toward the half-rebuilt shed, toward Thomas's daughter laughing near the well, toward Bram hammering nails into fresh timber. They had not embraced her, but they had not pushed her out either. "Choice," she said quietly. "Yes." She inhaled slowly, then nodded once. "I stay. Not as surrender, not as rescue, as decision." Elias extended his hand, not to pull her, not to lead her, just to stand beside her. After a moment, she took it. The wheat field where she had once collapsed in exile now held something else entirely. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But roots. And this time, she was choosing where they would grow. Harvest came again the following season, and the valley did not look the same. The rebuilt shed stood stronger than the last, reinforced with thicker beams and stone at its base. Fences were mended. Watch posts repaired. Bandit sightings had dwindled after a joint effort between nearby villages drove them farther north. And in the largest field near the broken fence line, 2 figures worked side by side beneath the morning sun. No one stared anymore. Not openly. Kayla moved through the wheat with practiced rhythm now, her motions no longer sharp with battle precision, but smooth with familiarity. Her burn had healed into a pale scar along her forearm. The wound at her side no longer pulled when she lifted heavy loads. Children ran between rows sometimes, not afraid, only curious. Thomas's daughter often walked beside her, asking endless questions about orc clans and distant mountains. Kayla answered simply, never glorifying war, never hiding truth. She was a warrior, the girl once whispered to another child. She still is, Elias corrected gently. Strength had simply changed shape. The first time Kayla entered the village market openly, there had been silence. Now, vendors nodded in greeting. Bram even haggled with her over timber weight one afternoon, grumbling about her unfair advantage in lifting beams. She did not smile often, but that day, she almost did. Elias noticed. The council no longer held emergency meetings about her presence. Instead, they consulted her when rumors of clan movement surfaced along the northern ridge. She did not command. She did not demand. She advised, because understanding both sides was no longer weakness. It was asset. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the valley in copper light, Elias paused at the edge of the field where he had first found her. The wheat bent gently in the breeze, golden and alive. Kayla joined him without a word. "You remember," he said quietly. "Yes." "You were bleeding." "Yes." "They were angry." "Yes." He glanced at her. "You could have left." "Yes." "But you didn't." "No." Silence settled comfortably between them, not heavy as it once had been, but grounded. "They called me monster," she said softly. "Yes." "And you stood in front of them." "Yes." She studied the field stretching before them. "Why?" she asked again, not confused now, but reflective. Elias took a slow breath. "Because someone once stood in front of me," he said. "During the war." She turned slightly toward him. "Who?" "A man I thought was enemy," Elias replied. "He chose not to kill when he could have." She absorbed that quietly. "Choice," she said again. "Yes." The word had shaped both their lives. From the road, a wagon rolled slowly toward the farm, carrying grain from neighboring fields. Two villagers waved casually as they passed. No one carried torches. No one carried pitchforks. The valley had not transformed into perfect harmony. Old scars remained. Suspicion still flickered in strangers' eyes when travelers passed through. But something fundamental had shifted. The children who grew up watching Kayla harvest wheat would not remember her as threat. They would remember her as the tall woman who lifted beams, who spoke blunt truth, who once walked into fire. They would remember Elias not as the man who hid a monster, but as the man who refused to let fear decide. As dusk settled fully, Kayla stepped back into the field and resumed cutting grain, her silhouette framed against the fading sky. Elias followed. They worked until the light thinned and the first stars appeared. The same field that had once held a wounded exile now held partnership. The same village that had once gathered in anger now gathered in shared labor. They had called her a monster. But monsters do not plant roots. Monsters do not rebuild what fire destroys. Monsters do not choose to stay when leaving would be easier. And in the quiet rhythm of harvest, beneath a sky that no longer felt divided by war, the valley learned something simple and lasting. Sometimes the bravest defense is not fought with steel. Sometimes it is fought with a door left open and the courage to stand in front of it.